The sound of the fluorescent lights was almost louder than the pain. They buzzed above Aaliyah's head like angry insects, filling the hospital waiting room with a cruel kind of stillness, the kind that made every whisper echo, every breath feel borrowed. She sat in the corner, knees pulled tight to her chest, the edges of a dirty blanket wrapped around her like armor. Her lips trembled. Her stomach twisted again, and a low cry escaped her throat before she could stop it. Heads turned for a moment, then turned away just as fast. In this place, suffering was ordinary, pain was background noise. Across the room, a mother soothed her crying child. An old man argued softly with the receptionist about a missing insurance card. But Aaliyah, she was invisible, too young to be respected, too poor to be heard, too black to be believed. She pressed her palm against her stomach and whispered through the pain, "Please, it hurts." The nurse walking past her didn't even glance down. She adjusted her clipboard, looked at the next name on her list, and kept moving. Another nurse followed, same result. Aaliyah's words drifted into the air and died before they reached anyone's ears. Then came Dr. Carter. His shoes were the first thing anyone noticed, polished so bright you could see your reflection in them. He walked with the confidence of a man who had never been ignored a day in his life. His coat was crisp, his watch gleamed, his voice, when he finally spoke, was sharp enough to slice through the air. "Who let her in here?" he said to no one in particular, though his eyes were fixed on Aaliyah. "This isn't a shelter." The nurse beside him hesitated. "She said she's in pain, doctor, severe abdominal." "Pain," he cut her off, scoffing. "They all say that. She probably wants a warm bed or a sandwich. Get her out of here before she starts screaming again." Aaliyah tried to stand, her blanket slipping from her shoulders. Her voice was soft but desperate. "Please, sir, I swear it hurts. It hurts so bad." For a moment, Carter's eyes met hers. There was a flicker, maybe guilt, maybe annoyance, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He turned away. "If we treated every sob story, we'd never get anything done," he said. Minutes passed, then an hour, then two. The night dragged on, cruel and heavy. The sound of machines filled the silence, the steady rhythm of heart monitors, the hiss of oxygen tanks, the faint chatter of nurses trading stories at the counter. And through it all, Aaliyah sat there, her body shaking. She whispered to herself, maybe a prayer, maybe a promise. Her small fingers clutched at her side like she was trying to hold her pain in place. When it happened fast. Her body stiffened, her eyes rolled back, and she fell forward, her head striking the cold tile floor with a hollow, sickening thud. The room went silent. Even the buzzing lights seemed to pause. A child gasped. A nurse dropped her pen. Carter turned. For the first time that night, the mask of control slipped from his face. "What happened?" he barked, though the answer was obvious. The nurses rushed to her, lifting her limp body onto a stretcher. Her arm dangled off the side, fingers twitching once, then going still. The monitor beside her came alive, beeping weakly, uncertainly. Carter stood over her, his jaw tight. "Get a pulse," he ordered. "Get a scan ready." One nurse called out numbers. Another prepped an IV. Carter watched the girl's face, pale under the harsh lights. Something about it unsettled him, the way her eyelids fluttered like she was caught between life and death, the way her lips moved, as if still whispering a plea he'd ignored. When the nurse hesitated, waiting for direction, he snapped back to life. "Fine," he said, more to himself than anyone. "Let's prove she's faking." But as he leaned closer, the reflection in her glassy eyes caught him off guard. It was his own face staring back, sharp, proud, untouched by empathy. He didn't like what he saw. The stretcher rolled through the hallway, wheels squeaking across the linoleum floor. Carter followed, pretending not to care. But inside, something was cracking. He told himself it was fatigue, that it was just another case. Still, he couldn't shake the image of her falling, that sound, that silence afterward. It lingered like a shadow. They slid her into the CT machine, her fragile body disappearing into the ring of humming metal. Carter crossed his arms, waiting. The nurse looked at him, then looked away. The hum of the scanner filled the room. When the results appeared on the screen, Carter's eyes narrowed. Then his breath caught. He leaned closer, his face inches from the monitor. "That can't be right," he muttered, but it was. The scan revealed internal bleeding. Severe, a ruptured appendix, maybe worse, hours without treatment, hours that he had wasted. The room went still again. No one spoke. The nurse beside him swallowed hard. "She could have died out there," she whispered. Carter said nothing. The weight of those words pressed down on him like gravity. He remembered her voice, small, trembling. "Please, sir, it hurts." And for the first time in years, Dr. Carter felt something unfamiliar: shame. It sat heavy in his chest as they rushed her to surgery. Every sound, the rush of gurneys, the squeak of shoes, the blare of alarms, blurred into one long, guilty echo. He followed her all the way to the operating room doors, then stopped, watching as they swung shut in his face. For a long time, he stood there, staring at the sign that read "Authorized Personnel Only." He'd been the one with authority all along, the one with power, the one who decided who was worthy of help, and he had used it to turn away a child. The hallway was quiet now, only his heartbeat filled the silence. Carter looked down at his hands, the same hands that had saved lives, shaken donors' hands, signed awards, accepted praise. Tonight they felt dirty. Behind those doors, a team fought to save the girl he'd dismissed. He wanted to walk away, to pretend this night never happened, but something, guilt, conscience, maybe something deeper, rooted him to the spot. When the doors finally opened and the nurse came out, he didn't breathe until she spoke. "She's alive," she said softly, "barely, but she's alive." Carter nodded, but his eyes dropped. The relief didn't feel like victory, it felt like mercy, the kind he hadn't shown. He turned and walked down the empty hall, the lights above humming once more. Every step echoed louder than the last, and though he didn't say it out loud, the truth had already carved itself into his soul. He had looked into the eyes of someone the world refused to see, and for the first time, he saw himself. The night wasn't over, but something inside him was beginning. Because that scan, the one he'd ordered to prove she was lying, had done something else instead. It had exposed the real sickness, not in her body, but in his heart. The hum of the machines was the only thing that dared to breathe in that dim hospital room. The walls were pale and lifeless, the kind of sterile white that could swallow up a person's spirit if you stared too long. Aaliyah lay still under the thin blanket, her face soft but pale, her lips cracked. The steady beeping beside her was faint, almost uncertain, as if even the monitor wasn't sure she'd make it through the night. Her tiny chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a fragile thread holding her between this world and whatever came next. Dr. Carter stood at the foot of her bed, flipping through the papers on his clipboard. The sound of rustling sheets of paper seemed too loud in that quiet room. His pen tapped rhythmically, not from care, but from irritation. He sighed. No insurance, no guardian, no records, nothing. The words rolled out of his mouth like a verdict. To him, she wasn't a story or a name or a heartbeat. She was a problem, a statistic, another anonymous burden in a system already overflowing. Nurse Ramirez, standing beside the bed, frowned. She had been watching Aaliyah's breathing, how shallow it was, how her body twitched from pain even in her sleep. Her hands were gentle when she adjusted the IV line. "Doctor," she said quietly, "she's just a kid." Carter didn't look up. His pen kept moving. "And we're not a charity, Ramirez. We have protocols. We can't treat every stray who walks in off the street." The silence that followed was colder than the air coming from the vent above them. The machines beeped again. Aaliyah shifted slightly, a faint groan escaping her lips, but Carter didn't look. His eyes were fixed on the chart, as if the ink on the paper mattered more than the life in front of him. Ramirez took a slow breath, her voice trembling now, not with fear, but with anger held too long. "You swore an oath," she whispered, "to do no harm." Her words hit harder than she knew. Carter froze for just a second, but pride made him straighten his shoulders. "I'm doing my job," he said flatly, but his voice didn't sound like authority anymore. It sounded defensive, small. Ramirez didn't argue. She just looked at him, that long, heavy look that said more than words ever could, and then walked out, the door clicking shut behind her. The room felt emptier after she left. Carter looked up, expecting to feel relief, but instead there was that silence again, that haunting, watchful silence. Aaliyah's breathing filled it, uneven, weak. Every inhale sounded like a cry she couldn't make. Hours passed, the night deepened. Carter tried to distract himself with other patients, other charts, other cases that made him feel useful, safe, important. But every time he walked past that door, he caught a glimpse of her motionless, fragile, small. He told himself she'd be fine, that she was exaggerating, that it was nothing serious. People like her always made things sound worse than they were. That's what he believed. That's what he needed to believe. But deep down, something kept tugging at the edges of his certainty. By the third hour, the beeping had changed. It was faster now, uneven. The nurse on duty called for him, panic edging her voice. "Doctor, you need to see this." He sighed, irritated, and walked in. What now? Then he saw her. Aaliyah's small body was shaking uncontrollably. Her fingers curled, her eyes fluttered, and the monitor screamed, sharp, shrill, panicked. Her body convulsed once, twice, then went still. Carter froze. For one long second, the world tilted. His clipboard slipped from his hand and hit the floor. "Get her to CT," he shouted. "Now." The nurses rushed in, moving fast, efficient, but terrified. The stretcher wheels squealed against the tile floor. Carter followed close behind, his pulse racing, his mind spinning. He could hear Ramirez's voice echoing somewhere in his head, "You swore an oath." Inside the CT room, the lights glowed dim blue. The machine hummed, cold and metallic, ready. They lifted Aaliyah onto the sliding table. Her head turned slightly, her hair spilling across the white sheet. For a second, she looked peaceful, too peaceful. Carter looked at her face, but the sight of it hurt. It wasn't supposed to. He was a professional, trained, hardened, but something about the way her eyelashes trembled made him look away. "Just hurry up," he said, his voice unsteady. The machine began to spin. The rhythmic pulse of its motion filled the silence. The nurses stood on one side, watching. Carter stood on the other, arms crossed, pretending his heart wasn't thundering in his chest. Minutes stretched like hours. Then the scan stopped. The room went quiet again. The nurse pulled up the images, one by one, onto the glowing screen. Carter stepped closer. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing. Then he did. His pen slipped from his hand and clattered onto the floor. His throat went dry. The images were clear. A massive infection spread through her abdomen, her organs swollen, the signs of rupture unmistakable. It had been growing inside her for days. Hours more without surgery, and her body would have shut down completely. He took a step back, his eyes wide, his breath shallow. "My God," he whispered. The nurse looked at him, waiting for direction, but he couldn't speak. All the words, all his pride, all his cold logic vanished. His arrogance had nearly killed her. A child. Aaliyah's monitor beeped again, reminding him she was still fighting, still alive, somehow, despite him. He blinked hard, his vision blurring. For the first time in years, his hands trembled. He turned away, pressing a hand to his mouth, as the truth slammed into him like thunder. This wasn't about policies or insurance or protocol. It was about his heart and what he'd let it become. The nurse broke the silence. "What do you want us to do, doctor?" Carter swallowed, his voice breaking. "Prep for emergency surgery," he said. "Now." The team moved quickly, but Carter didn't. He stood for a moment longer, staring at the scan glowing on the screen. The image of that infection felt like a reflection, like a mirror held up to his own soul. Something inside him was rotten too, something he'd ignored for far too long. When they wheeled Aaliyah out, her small hand brushed against his sleeve. It was unconscious, accidental, but it stopped him in his tracks. That touch, that faint, trembling touch, carried more truth than any lecture or reprimand ever could. He followed the stretcher through the hall, silent, haunted by the sound of his own footsteps. The same hallway where he'd told her she didn't belong. The same place where he'd decided who was worth saving. Now all he could think was asterisk 1 more hour, just one, and she would have been gone. Gone because of him. He looked up at the ceiling lights flickering above him and whispered under his breath, "I almost killed her." The words burned coming out, but they were true. That night, in the sterile halls of a hospital that prided itself on healing, Dr. Carter came face to face with the sickness that medicine couldn't cure, a heart hardened by prejudice, pride, and indifference. And as the surgery doors closed in front of him, the sound of the monitor echoed down the hallway, a faint, stubborn reminder that mercy can still survive where arrogance once lived. The sound of the monitor filled the room like a heartbeat that refused to quit. Dr. Carter stood frozen in front of the glowing screen, his throat dry, his palms slick. The images stared back at him, sharp, undeniable proof of how close she'd come to death. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. How could I miss this?" The words broke apart as soon as they left his mouth. They didn't sound like a question, they sounded like a confession. Behind him, the door creaked open. Nurse Ramirez stepped in quietly, her face unreadable. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence filled the space between them, heavy and deliberate. Carter couldn't look her in the eye. He could handle anger lectures, even accusations, but not that silence. It burned deeper than blame. It said everything words couldn't. You knew better. You just didn't care enough. He turned away, trying to steady his breath. "Get the surgical team ready," he muttered, pretending authority still meant something. Ramirez nodded once, then left to prepare the room. Carter stared down at the clipboard in his hand, the same one he'd been tapping on hours ago when he'd dismissed her pain, the same clipboard that had carried his arrogance. Now it felt heavier, almost like judgment. He rushed back to Aaliyah's bedside. The air was thick with urgency, nurses moving fast, prepping instruments, monitors beeping, gloves snapping. Aaliyah lay there, pale as paper, her lips slightly parted as if still whispering for help. Carter leaned over her, his breath uneven. "Stay with me," he said under his breath, the words trembling. "Stay with me, please." He flipped open her chart again, scanning through the recent entries. Something new caught his eye, a small notification blinking in the corner of the tablet screen. "Database update complete," it read. Curious, he tapped it. A new file opened, recently uploaded from the city's welfare system. A name appeared, a date of birth. His eyes narrowed, then widened. The name read, Aaliyah Carter. For a second he thought it was a glitch, a coincidence, but his heart didn't believe that. His knees felt weak. He stumbled back, the clipboard slipping from his fingers and clattering to the floor. "No," he whispered. "No, it can't be." The world seemed to tilt. The hospital noise faded. All he could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He pressed a hand to his forehead, as if he could shake the memory away, but it came back in full color, sharp, painful, unstoppable. A younger version of himself stood in a small apartment, the air thick with shouting and tears. His sister, Naomi, was crying, holding a newborn baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Her face was tired, desperate. "Please, Michael, they're going to take her. I just need help for a few weeks. Please." And he, proud and polished even back then, had stood by the door shaking his head. "You made your choices, Naomi. I can't fix them. You're ruining your life." He remembered the way she had looked at him like she was seeing a stranger. "You'll regret this," she had said through tears. "You'll regret turning away from blood." Then the door had closed, and a few weeks later the social workers came. The baby was taken, Naomi disappeared soon after. He had buried the memory deep, convincing himself it wasn't his fault, that it was better that way, that some people couldn't be saved. But now, standing here, staring at the name on the chart, Aaliyah Carter, every lie he told himself fell apart. That baby, his niece, the one he'd let the world forget, was lying in front of him, fighting for her life. He pressed his hands against his face, his breath shaking. "Dear God," he whispered, "what have I done?" Ramirez returned, wheeling in the surgical tray. She noticed the look on his face, pale, stricken, but said nothing. "We are ready," she told him quietly. Carter blinked, his eyes wet, his voice barely steady. "I'll do it," he said. "Prep her for emergency surgery." "Doctor, the chief." "I said I'll do it." His voice cracked, not with authority, but with desperation. He turned toward Aaliyah, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead with a trembling hand. "I won't lose you," he whispered. "Not again." Ramirez hesitated, sensing something deeper behind his words, but there was no time for questions. The team moved into motion. The lights above brightened. The air turned cold. The hum of machines filled the silence as they wheeled her into the operating room. Carter scrubbed in, his hands trembling under the running water. The weight of years pressed down on him, every decision, every word of dismissal, every life he'd treated like a number. The reflection staring back at him in the metal sink looked older, broken. For the first time, he didn't see Dr. Carter, the respected physician. He saw a man who had run from mercy. Inside the operating room, the tension was thick. The nurses waited. The anesthesiologist checked the monitors. Carter took a deep breath and stepped forward. The room went quiet as his gloved hands hovered over her small body. Each movement was careful, deliberate. Every incision, every decision driven not by protocol, but by something rawer, something human, guilt, love, redemption. His heart raced as the surgery unfolded. Hours blurred together in a haze of sweat, focus, and whispered prayers. Every cut felt like penance. Every stitch felt like a promise. He could almost hear Naomi's voice in his head, soft, trembling, forgiving. "Save her," she seemed to whisper. "Save her for both of us." The room buzzed with tension. Aaliyah's heart rate dropped once, twice, before stabilizing. Carter's pulse quickened. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Stay with me, baby girl, stay with me." At last, after what felt like a lifetime, the monitor beeped steady again. Relief flooded the room like light breaking through clouds. Carter stepped back, his hands trembling, his mask damp with sweat. He looked down at her face, peaceful now, her chest rising with slow, steady breaths. He exhaled shakily, the tears he'd been holding finally breaking free. Ramirez looked at him, and for the first time, he didn't hide from her gaze. There was no pride left, no wall between them, just truth. When they wheeled Aaliyah to recovery, Carter stayed behind. He stood in the middle of the silent room, staring at the blood on his gloves, the reflection of the overhead light in the steel tray. His voice was low when he finally spoke. "I thought I was saving lives," he said softly, "but all this time I was losing my own." He pulled off his gloves and dropped them into the bin. The sound was small, but it echoed. Outside, the night was still. The hum of the hospital faded into quiet. For the first time in years, Carter felt the weight of what it meant to be human, to be fallible, to be forgiven. He looked down the hall toward the recovery ward, where Aaliyah now rested, his niece, his second chance. And in that moment, beneath the harsh white lights of the hospital that had once made him feel powerful, Dr. Carter finally understood what mercy really looked like. It wasn't a word written in an oath. It was a choice, one he had almost forgotten how to make. Morning light slips through the blinds like a quiet promise, touching the edges of the white hospital walls. Machines hum softly, steady and calm, a rhythm that feels almost human after the storm of last night. Dr. Carter sits slumped in a chair beside the bed, his lab coat wrinkled, his eyes hollow. The sterile smell of antiseptic clings to him, but beneath it, something else lingers, the raw ache of redemption. He watches Aaliyah's still face, the faint color returning to her cheeks, and whispers to himself, "Breathe, baby, just breathe." His voice cracks on the word baby asterisk, like it still feels foreign to his lips. The same lips that once told his sister to let go of her child. Now he would trade everything, his title, his career, his pride, just to hold that life steady one more day. A faint sound escapes Aaliyah's lips. It's small, fragile, but it's their asterisk. Carter jerks forward, disbelief and relief colliding in his chest. Her eyelashes tremble, her breathing deepens, then slowly, painfully, her eyes open. The world floods back into her gaze, blurry but real. She looks around, confused, the bright lights and beeping machines painting a picture she doesn't understand yet. When her eyes finally settle on the man beside her, she squints. Her voice is a whisper, hoarse from the tubes and pain. "You're the doctor." Carter swallows hard. He wants to smile, but the guilt won't let him. He nods instead, eyes glistening. "Yeah," he says softly, "I'm the doctor." Then his breath hitches. He knows this moment can't pass without the truth. His voice breaks as he adds, "And I'm also your uncle." The words hang in the air like a confession years overdue. He looks down, unable to meet her eyes. "I should have been there, I should have fought for you, but I didn't, and I'm sorry for everything I didn't see." Aaliyah stares at him, the name Carter suddenly clicking into place. Her lips part as if she wants to speak, but only silence comes out. A silence heavy with decades of abandonment and the long shadow of a broken family. But it's not the cold silence of rejection anymore. It's something softer, the silence that comes before forgiveness. She takes a shallow breath, and her hand, small and trembling, moves toward him. It takes her strength, every bit she has left, but she reaches his fingers. Her touch is light but steady, grounding. "You saw me now," she whispers, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Those words pierce him deeper than any accusation ever could. He leans forward, pressing her hand to his forehead. Tears spill freely down his face, years of pride and pain dissolving into something purer, love. The kind that doesn't ask for perfection, just presence. He realizes that all the titles he chased, chief surgeon, department head, medical scholar, mean nothing compared to this moment. None of them ever healed what was broken inside him. But this fragile connection, is the medicine he didn't know he needed. Days pass, but something in the hospital changes. The staff notices it first. The way Dr. Carter walks slower now, listens longer. The way his eyes soften when patients speak. Gone is the man who measured success in surgical outcomes and prestige. In his place stands someone who measures it in human hearts beating again. He stands before his medical team, the same group who once feared his temper and precision. His tone is different now, calm, humble, resolute. "From today," he says, looking each one in the eye, "no one in pain is invisible, not in my hospital." Some of them exchange glances, unsure what changed. Others nod, quietly moved, but Nurse Ramirez knows. She stands at the back of the room, arms crossed, the faintest hint of a smile breaking through her usual sternness. She saw him at his lowest, the night he almost lost his niece. She saw how that truth broke him open and built him anew. She sees now a man who finally understands what healing really means. Later that afternoon, Carter returns to Aaliyah's room. She's sitting up now, color returning to her face, sunlight touching her hair. The city hums softly beyond the window, a steady heartbeat of life continuing. He wheels her chair to the window, the soft creak of the wheels echoing through the quiet room. Outside, the skyline stretches, tall, gray, endless. Aaliyah stares at it, awe in her eyes. "It's beautiful," she says. Carter nods, watching her instead of the view. "It is," he murmurs, "and so are you." She smiles, faint but full, the kind that carries pain and peace at once. He sees himself reflected in her eyes, not as the polished surgeon with all the answers, but as a man stripped bare, finally human. As they sit together, sunlight draping across them like forgiveness, Carter feels the weight of his past lift. Not because it's gone, but because he's no longer running from it. The girl he once ignored has become the mirror through which he finally sees himself. He understands now that compassion isn't something you learn from books or hospitals. It's something that's born the moment you see someone, really see them, for who they are, not where they came from. Outside, the world keeps moving, cars passing, people rushing, but inside that room, time slows. The hum of the machines fades. The air feels sacred. Aaliyah leans her head back, eyes closed, a peaceful smile still resting on her lips. Carter looks at her and whispers, almost to himself, "You saved me, kid." When he wheels her out into the courtyard a few days later, the sun is warm and golden. The wind smells of fresh rain and blooming grass. Aaliyah laughs softly, the sound like music after a long silence. She lifts her face to the light, and Carter just watches, letting the moment etch itself into his soul. For the first time in years, he feels alive, not as a doctor, not as a man chasing redemption, but as an uncle, a brother, a human being capable of love. The camera lingers on their reflections in the hospital window, two generations of Carters, broken yet mended, scarred yet still shining. The city rises behind them, busy and unbothered, but something within them has stilled. And as the screen fades, the narrator's voice comes low, warm, and steady. Sometimes, the ones we overlook are the ones sent to save us. Compassion is not charity, it's humanity rediscovered. The hum of life returns, the light softens, and the story ends not with triumph but with truth.